In just 47 seconds, $3.6 million in hidden FBI budget allocations would be exposed. Pam Bondi didn't expect the trap. She thought her silence would protect him. Cameras captured everything. The Senate chamber held its breath. What did Senator Sheldon Whitehouse reveal that made the most powerful law enforcement duo in America collapse before Congress? At exactly 2:17 p.m., on January 23, 2025, the Hart Senate office building buzzed with an energy that veteran reporters recognized immediately. This wasn't routine oversight. FBI Director Kash Patel walked through the marble corridors like an investigator who had seen too many lies, his jaw set with the confidence of a man who believed his story was bulletproof. Behind him, stacks of declassified memos, encrypted USBs, and congressional subpoenas filled his briefcase. He'd prepared for this moment for weeks, rehearsing answers about grand jury testimony, sealed records, and court orders with the precision of a chess master. Attorney General Pam Bondi entered separately, her navy suit crisp, an American flag pin catching the television lights. She carried herself like a senator carved in ambition, flanked by legal advisors clutching briefing folders marked with the DOJ seal. In her mind, this hearing would be straightforward: support her FBI director, deflect with patriotic rhetoric, weather the storm. She had no idea that in less than 3 hours, her silence would become the weapon that destroyed the very man she came to protect. The hearing room itself told the story of American power. Mahogany desks, arranged in perfect rows, the echo of tension bouncing off walls lined with portraits of former senators. Camera crews from CNN, Fox News, and C-SPAN positioned themselves strategically, knowing that whatever happened here would shape the narrative of the administration for months to come. The air crackled with anticipation as senators filed in, each carrying their own agenda, their own political calculations. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse arrived at 2:03 p.m., 14 minutes before the scheduled start. Unlike the theatrical preparations of his targets, Whitehouse moved with the quiet efficiency of a prosecutor who already knew how the case would end. His folder contained just 3 documents, but those 3 documents would prove more devastating than any explosive rhetoric or partisan grandstanding. He took his seat, adjusted his microphone, and waited with the patience of a hunter who had spent months setting the perfect trap. The opening statements proceeded as expected. Chairman Chuck Grassley outlined the scope of the hearing, emphasizing the importance of accountability in federal law enforcement. Ranking Member Dick Durbin spoke about the delicate balance between oversight and operational independence. Patel listened with practiced composure, occasionally taking notes, projecting the image of a dedicated public servant, ready to answer any reasonable question about his stewardship of the FBI. Bondi's opening was textbook political theater. She spoke of the FBI's crucial role in protecting American democracy, praised Patel's leadership during challenging times, and reminded the committee that political disagreements should never undermine the men and women who keep the nation safe. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms and campaign rallies, someone who knew how to use patriotic language as both shield and sword. The first hour passed without incident. Republican senators asked friendly questions about FBI successes. Democratic senators probed around the edges of controversial investigations. Patel answered with the smooth confidence of a man who had survived confirmation hearings and knew all the right phrases about ongoing investigations and national security concerns. His answers were careful, measured, professional. Everything was proceeding exactly as Bondi had hoped. Twitter began lighting up with preliminary reactions. Conservative accounts praised Patel's composure. Liberal voices criticized soft questioning. Cable news talking heads analyzed body language and parsed careful phrases for hidden meanings. Patel hearing started trending, but the early posts were routine, predictable, forgettable. No one anticipated that they were witnessing the calm before a political earthquake. At exactly 3:31 p.m., everything changed. Whitehouse was recognized for his questioning period, and something in the room's atmosphere shifted immediately. Perhaps it was his tone, measured but carrying an undercurrent of prosecutorial intensity. Perhaps it was the way he opened his folder and removed a single sheet of paper with deliberate precision. Perhaps it was simply the silence that fell over the chamber, as senators and staff realized they were about to witness something significant. Director Patel, White House began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years dismantling carefully constructed lies. I want to discuss your previous testimony to this committee regarding your grand jury testimony in what's been called the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Patel's shoulders tensed, almost imperceptibly. This was the minefield he'd hoped to avoid, the topic his lawyers had drilled him on endlessly. Senator, I'm happy to address that within the bounds of what I can legally discuss. That's exactly what I want to explore, Whitehouse continued, his eyes never leaving Patel's face. Because you told this committee, under oath, that you couldn't discuss your grand jury testimony because it had been sealed by the Department of Justice and was under court order. Do you remember that testimony? I do, Senator. That was my understanding at the time. Patel's voice remained steady, but his knuckles had gone white as he gripped his pen. Whitehouse lifted the paper from his folder. You specifically mentioned Chief Judge Beryl Howell of the D.C. District Court as having issued an order preventing you from discussing your testimony. Is that correct? Bondi shifted in her chair. This was the moment she could have intervened, could have clarified the legal complexity of grand jury secrecy rules, could have provided cover for her FBI director. Instead, she remained silent, believing that letting Patel handle the questioning himself was the safer political choice, that silence would prove to be the first crack in a dam that was about to burst. That was my understanding, yes, Patel repeated, but there was something different in his voice now, a slight hesitation that veteran reporters immediately noticed. Whitehouse's voice remained calm, almost conversational. Well, Director, I have here a letter from Chief Judge Howell's chambers, dated 3 weeks after your testimony. Would you like me to read it to you? The chamber fell silent. Even the court stenographer seemed to pause her typing. Patel's face began to drain of color as he realized where this was heading. The letter states, and I quote, "There was no court order issued by this court, or any other court, preventing Director Patel from discussing his own grand jury testimony. Mr. Patel was not restricted from speaking about his own sworn statements." End quote. Gasps rippled through the gallery. CNN's camera zoomed in on Patel's face, capturing the moment when confidence transformed into something approaching panic. Fox News cut their regular programming to focus entirely on the hearing. Twitter exploded with real-time reactions as viewers watched a federal law enforcement chief's carefully constructed defense crumble in real time. Patel attempted to recover. Senator, the situation with grand jury materials is complex, and there may have been miscommunication between. Director, Whitehouse interrupted with surgical precision. This isn't complex. You told this committee, under oath, that a federal judge had issued an order. That judge now says no such order existed. Were you mistaken? Or were you untruthful? This was the moment when Bondi should have stepped in. As Attorney General, she had the authority and responsibility to clarify complex legal issues, to provide context that might explain any confusion. She could have spoken about the general principles of grand jury secrecy, about how even experienced attorneys sometimes misunderstand jurisdictional issues. Her intervention might not have completely saved Patel, but it could have provided a face-saving explanation. Instead, Bondi sat frozen, her face a mask of calculated neutrality. Her political instincts, honed through decades of partisan warfare, told her that any comment could be turned against her later. Better to let Patel sink alone than risk being pulled down with him. That calculation, though politically understandable, would prove to be one of the most devastating tactical errors in modern congressional hearing history. There may have been confusion about the source of the restrictions, Patel stammered. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chamber's careful climate control. Whitehouse wasn't finished. Let's talk about what you said happened next. You told this committee that you had worked with the Department of Justice to have your grand jury testimony publicly released as a transcript. Is that accurate? Patel glanced desperately toward Bondi, looking for any sign of support, any indication that his boss would provide cover. He found none. Bondi stared straight ahead, her expression revealing nothing, her silence becoming more conspicuous with each passing second. Senator, my understanding was that steps were being taken to. Director, let me save you some time, Whitehouse interrupted. I contacted the Department of Justice yesterday. No transcript of your grand jury testimony has been publicly released. None is scheduled for release. The department confirms that no such transcript exists in any public forum. So when you told this committee that your testimony had been publicly released, was that accurate? The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Patel's mouth opened and closed without producing words. His staff, sitting behind him, exchanged horrified glances. The FBI Director of the United States, the man responsible for truth and justice in federal law enforcement, had been caught in multiple false statements under oath. Social media erupted. Patel began trending within minutes. Video clips of his stammering response spread across platforms faster than any FBI investigation could track. Cable news analysts struggled to find historical parallels for such a complete collapse of a law enforcement chief's credibility in a single hearing. But the most devastating moment was yet to come. Attorney General Bondi, Whitehouse continued, his tone shifting to include both officials in his crosshairs. You're here today, ostensibly to support Director Patel's testimony. Given what we've just established about the factual inaccuracies in his previous statements, would you like to clarify the department's position on any of these matters? This was Bondi's final opportunity. She could have acknowledged confusion, promised internal review, or provided any reasonable explanation that might have salvaged something from the wreckage. She could have taken responsibility for communication failures within her department, deflecting some blame from Patel while demonstrating leadership. Instead, she delivered the blow that finished Patel completely. Senator, I don't believe it would be appropriate for me to comment on ongoing legal matters or internal departmental communications at this time. The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. With that single sentence, Bondi had abandoned her FBI director completely. She had chosen institutional self-preservation over loyalty, political calculation over leadership, personal safety over professional solidarity. Patel's reaction was immediately visible to millions of viewers. His shoulders sagged as if he'd been physically struck. His face, already pale, became ashen. For the first time in his career, the man who had built his reputation on unwavering confidence looked utterly defeated. He had been left to face congressional scrutiny alone, without the support of the very person who had appointed him and sworn to stand behind him. Whitehouse recognized the moment for what it was. Total victory. So, to summarize for the record, Director Patel made demonstrably false statements to this committee about court orders that didn't exist and public transcripts that were never released. The Attorney General, despite being here ostensibly to support him, refuses to clarify, explain, or defend any of these statements. Is that an accurate characterization? Neither Patel nor Bondi responded. The silence stretched for 7 excruciating seconds, captured by every camera in the room, broadcast live to a nation watching the credibility of its top law enforcement officials evaporate in real time. The hearing's aftermath was swift and merciless. Within hours, calls for Patel's resignation echoed from both parties. Republican senators who had defended him that morning issued carefully worded statements about the importance of truthfulness in federal service. Democratic senators demanded investigations into perjury and obstruction of justice. Editorial boards across the country published scathing critiques of both officials, with many focusing specifically on Bondi's betrayal of her subordinate. But perhaps the most damaging coverage came from law enforcement professionals themselves. FBI agents, speaking anonymously to reporters, expressed horror at seeing their director humiliated on national television without support from his superior. Federal prosecutors questioned how they could present cases involving FBI testimony when the Bureau's credibility had been so thoroughly compromised. The institutional damage extended far beyond 2 individuals. It threatened the foundations of federal law enforcement itself. In the days that followed, leaked conversations revealed the full scope of Bondi's political calculation. According to sources within the Justice Department, she had explicitly decided before the hearing that distancing herself from Patel was the safer choice for her own career prospects. She had calculated that defending him might tie her reputation to his potential downfall, while abandoning him would demonstrate her independence and judgment. Bit calculation backfired spectacularly. Rather than appearing principled, Bondi was widely seen as disloyal and cowardly. Rather than demonstrating leadership, she had shown herself willing to sacrifice subordinates for personal advancement. The very silence she thought would protect her became the defining moment of her tenure as Attorney General. Patel's resignation came exactly 1 week after the hearing. His statement, released through his attorney, was brief and bitter. "I served my country with honor and integrity. I regret that others did not show the same commitment to truth and loyalty that I tried to bring to public service." The implicit criticism of Bondi was unmistakable. Bondi's own position became untenable within a month. While she had avoided the immediate legal jeopardy that Patel faced, the political damage was irreversible. Her refusal to support her FBI director had created enemies across the law enforcement community, while her association with his false statements tainted her reputation among political allies. She announced her resignation on February 28, citing a desire to return to private practice. The broader implications extended far beyond individual careers. Congressional oversight of the Justice Department intensified dramatically, with both parties agreeing that the hearing had revealed fundamental failures of accountability and leadership. New protocols were established requiring attorney generals to explicitly support or disavow their subordinates' congressional testimony, preventing future instances of strategic silence. The FBI itself underwent significant reforms, with new leadership implementing enhanced training on congressional testimony and legal obligations. The Bureau's relationship with Congress, damaged by years of political controversy, required months of careful rebuilding under new leadership that prioritized transparency and accuracy over political considerations. For students of political communication and crisis management, the hearing became a case study in how silence can be more damaging than speech. Bondi's calculated decision to remain quiet, while politically understandable, demonstrated how abandoning allies in crisis can often cause more damage than supporting them through controversy. The ultimate irony was not lost on political observers. Pam Bondi's attempt to save herself by sacrificing Kash Patel had destroyed them both. Her silence, intended as protection, became the weapon that finished not just his career, but her own. In trying to avoid being pulled down with him, she had created the very scandal that consumed them both. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a badge or a subpoena, it's silence deployed at precisely the wrong moment, creating devastation that truth and loyalty might have prevented. When leaders abandon their subordinates to save themselves, they often discover that treachery is a knife that cuts both ways. The choice between loyalty and self-preservation isn't always as clear as it seems, and sometimes attempting to save yourself destroys everything worth saving. What happens when an attorney general's silence speaks louder than any defense? If leadership can't survive accountability, was it ever really leadership at all? The answers, captured in 47 seconds of devastating congressional testimony, remind us that in government, as in life, courage and cowardice are often separated by nothing more than the decision to speak or remain silent when it matters most. This dramatized story is inspired by real events and public figures. All dialogue and incidents are fictionalized for commentary and educational purposes. This is not intended to defame, but to explore themes of power, truth, and accountability.